So, okay, tease some taste buds. What are some examples of dishes that people might be able to expect on a rotating menu?
Right now we're working on a swordfish dish with like a mango chutney over a rice pilaf that he's going to be putting onto the next rotation.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and the Hotel Deco has been a prominent part of the downtown Omaha scene, especially when it was converted to a full-service hotel in 1989. But you cannot have a great hotel without a signature restaurant, and that's where my guest today comes in. He's cooked in some of Omaha's most iconic restaurants, and now he's bringing his skills to Monarch Restaurant, which is the restaurant inside Hotel Deco. This is the executive chef, Matthew Sheehan. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Dan. Thank you.
So obviously, this is a landmark in Omaha that is very special, as you have become the head of this kitchen. And as we're talking, this is really within the last month. It's all still very new to you. But what makes this a special kitchen and a special building overall to you?
Well, the building itself, I believe, is on the historic registry, so it's one of those old buildings that just gives downtown Omaha its real charm. And what I really enjoy about it and what brought me over to it was the fact that it mixes kind of that old world charm that you have from the Deco style, where we have floors that have been in place since like the 1920s, I want to say, is the last time they were updated, and still maintain some of those old railways that are in this system, but also bringing in all the modern equipment and all the nice modern touches to it. So the kitchen itself is beautiful, the building itself is beautiful. I'm just excited to get in there and kind of showcase, as one of the historic hotels that we have, be able to showcase what Nebraska has not only to our local audience, but all the people coming in town, to show them, you know, that Omaha is a great place to be in a foodie city. It's not just some random blue dot in the middle of the Midwest.
I love that. What's the balance for you? Because you talk about the excitement of being able to be a prominent part of Omaha's dining scene and to showcase this historic building. But there's also a good deal of pressure that comes with that, because people have a certain expectation, I think, when they hear the Hotel Deco and they get a chance to dine there. How do you, like, what's the balance between those things?
So I like to kind of balance it out between showcasing and highlighting also other chefs that I work with, so it's not just me. So we've got our rotating menu, but we have our staple menu. The staple menu showcases for people coming in out of town, or, you know, even locals who want just like nice Nebraska beef. All our beef and all our pork products are sourced locally through local purveyors. We get prime and above too, so just like the best quality you possibly can. So that's kind of for more of your staple, you know, like, oh, I want to come in and just have a steak or something like that. But then to get the creative and kind of branch out into how Omaha's scene has expanded and to allow for a lot more chef creativity and finished dishes. Me and a team of 5 other guys, we all put a different dish on the menu every 4 months. At the time of this podcast coming out, we'll probably have a new menu coming out in the next month or so, where we just rotate down 5 different dishes, where we sit down, we kind of hone our skills and perfect what we can with them.
That's really interesting. What are some, I guess, where did the idea for having this rotating menu come from?
A lot of places that I had worked in the past, like V-Mertz and Avoli, all had rotating menus, and they were all fantastic, and I learned a lot under those chefs. The people that I brought on to help me out over at the Hotel Deco are all really seasoned and really experienced guys, and I really wanted to expand the kitchen to be more than just, oh, it's exactly what the head chef wants every time. I wanted everybody to be able to put in their input to feel heard, and so that we can all hone our skills together and present something that is collectively what we believe to be the best possible dishes we can put out there for the community.
So, okay, tease some taste buds. What are some examples of dishes that people might be able to expect on a rotating menu?
One of our chefs, Charles, he's a pescatarian, and he has been for the last 10 years. So coming in, and when I was working at the steakhouse with him, he really didn't have anywhere to expand or express his palate. Right now we're working on a swordfish dish with like a mango chutney over a rice pilaf that he's going to be putting onto the next rotation. We currently have a Mediterranean sea bass with some summer vegetables that are going out of season, so that will be coming off the menu and rotating into the swordfish dish. One of our chefs, Ricky, is from Mexico, and he's been working on a Mexican chicken dish that I believe will be very interesting and very good to have when we finally put the finishing touches on it.
So just in case anyone's listening to this and doesn't know where Hotel Deco or the Monarch restaurant is located, right off 15th and Harney in downtown Omaha. And put that little, you mentioned the blue pin, put the little blue pin down right there. Mm-hmm. As you take over the kitchen here and assume that leadership position, what do you want the restaurant to become? How do you want to define Monarch as a dining experience?
Especially being at the bottom of the Hotel Deco, where we have a pretty high occupancy rate and we have all these events going on in Omaha. I really wanted to just highlight what Omaha can bring to the market in terms of the first experience they have in Omaha if they're staying here for a week. Things like Berkshire Hathaway, things like College World Series. I want to make sure that people coming in see that Omaha is, a serious dining town, something to be taken not lightly from people that have to come in for business from like New York or Chicago. The amount of times that I've talked to a guest and they've said, wow, Omaha's a really foodie city. And I'm like, yeah, we've got a lot to offer. We can compete with some of the bigger cities as well. So I really want to highlight the first experience that they have, the guest has staying in the hotel, and any experience for people outside of the hotel, that we are really very much a vibrant foodie community and have a lot of talented chefs here. So I want to highlight Omaha in terms of our production value, being in the middle of, production city being in the middle of cattle country, making sure that we can showcase the best products that Omaha has to offer locally, and then being able to show that we have talented chefs who can take that product and make something fantastic with it.
Oh, we got a chance to talk a little bit on the phone before we hopped on this podcast here, and something that you just hammered home time and time again. I felt like throughout the conversation, it was just local. We want to showcase local products. We want to showcase local producers. Not everything. You can't do everything locally. Mm-hmm. So not getting a lot of swordfish here.
Yeah.
But like you kept saying local, local, local. What is it about local that you're so passionate about? What does that do for the food?
Not only are we not waiting that lag time or coming from big box corporations where we're just, if they have a bad product of 1 in 1,000, it doesn't mean anything to them. It's 1 in 1,000. It's like a statistical error for them. Working with the local people in the local community, not only are we able to give back, but it ensures the quality of our product is just objectively better. I've worked for, restaurants where we're getting our beef from Chicago or something like that. And even though it doesn't feel as far away as some of those other places, coming down from Chicago and kind of the market that they have up there, you get bad products sometimes. I never want to see that go out to the guest or even come into my building. And keeping it local, they check it, I check it. I have that working relationship with the purveyors where we can talk about, hey, maybe this isn't something, this isn't the quality of product that we want to bring in. But it also just helps ensure that every single time we get something with this rotating menu and the smaller menus, that consistently every single product that goes out is going to be the best possible product that we can give out. I don't want to have any hiccups of, you get shipped a bad case of something, well, somebody's got to move it, Mm-hmm. So,
can you give me an example of 1 or 2 partnerships that really excite you right now with local producers?
So right now we're working with Barn Girls, which is a micro farms group out of Ralston. They just started up. Every week we get fresh microgreens dropped. Right now we're working on micro wasabi, which I'm really excited about. That's something that I hadn't really seen, but obviously getting fresh pea shoots, fresh sunflower shoots, just to go on and elevate some of those dishes is really nice. We're working with John's Natural for pork. Mm-hmm. They're pretty well known. They used to do a ton of beef products, but unfortunately I don't think that we can keep up with the demand that they need for the beef. But right now, working with them for pork chops, and pork tenderloins, it's just fantastic. It's kind of like the Cadillac of the pork right now is what I'm seeing coming out of it. Marbling's fantastic and everything. In terms of beef, what we're doing is we're going through American Winter Farms. Sorry, we just started with them. and they are American Wagyu, which is just a step above prime, but not like the A5 Wagyu that everyone's.
Yeah.
But they are locally out of western Nebraska, and the cows don't move more than 100 miles to get to the slaughterhouse, and they move in very small batches. I believe they quoted me like batches of 5 cows at a time only go. Yeah.
Wow.
So
how do you, because I mean, there are, like you mentioned, there's so many ranches where you can get cattle from in Nebraska. There are so many places where you can get microgreens. Maybe John's Naturals kind of has, they've got the corner on pork right now. But anyway, for whatever produce or whatever you're sourcing, there are a lot of different producers that you can go to. How have you gone about creating those relationships and identifying these are the ranches, these are the farmers specifically that we think embody the ethos and the values of what we want Monarch to be?
The nice thing about having worked under some great chefs in Omaha before this is that I was able to see a lot of those connections already being made, especially some of those farms when they first started up, coming into restaurants and trying to get their products. So just keeping your eyes and ears open and then looking at who is being used by everybody else, you know, what farms are being oversourced right now. You know, Plum Creek Farms is a great farm, but with managing all the different accounts they have, you know, that might not be something that we can go in the direction of for there. So it's just kind of checking to see where we can get consistency and then knowing those relationships that I've had in the past. For example, with Barn Girls, they came into Sullivan's when I was there and were trying to sell us some microgreens. I was like, unfortunately, that's not something I can put on the menu right now, but you just keep the card, you keep it in the back pocket, move over to Monarch, give them a call day one, and we're set up and ready to go, you know?
Mm-hmm. So I'm always curious when a chef takes over another kitchen, especially one that is well-known and established like Monarch is. What is that balance for you between coming in and saying, okay, I know I've got my personality, my background as a chef. You talked about your kind of core team of 5 guys. Like they bring their unique skill sets and backgrounds as well. What is that balance between kind of leaving the menu as it is because guests have come to expect a certain thing from eating at Monarch, but also you want to put your twist on it. You want to put your dishes on it. And maybe you talked about it already. Maybe it's just that rotating menu versus the traditional menu, but just walk me through that. As you take over the kitchen, how do you kind of make it your own without completely shifting what Monarch is?
So to allow for the guest experience to be as best as possible, especially in transitional periods like this, I like to go back and look at, you know, the numbers basically, because the numbers won't lie to me in terms of what is being sold and what's being recommended the most. So things like the charcuterie boards and the Brussels sprouts, there's small things when I came in that we did to elevate the dishes a little more, but we kind of left the essence of what the dish was, what the guests came to expect to be there. So we might tweak the sauce a little bit for a little more pepper. We might add some house-cured jams to the charcuterie board and bring in some like nicer imported cheeses or something like that. But the essence of what the dish is, I try and leave the same so that the guests coming back can continue to have whatever they've come to expect. You know, we're right across the street from the Orpheum. Everybody goes there for Orpheum season. So if somebody's been coming in for the last 4 years getting the same thing, I don't want to mess with the heart of what that dish is or the experience that they're having. We have several people who come in through anything, rain or shine. They come in before their Orpheum show. They get the same thing they've always gotten. I really don't want to mess with those dishes, but I do want to tweak them a little bit to elevate them. So to kind of leaving on some of the things that people have come to expect and then rotating on some extra items there to give the seamless transition from what the old menu was into what the new vision that we have currently.
What excites you about the evolution of, I was going to just say the menu, but let's just say the restaurant overall? Like as you kind of look at taking over ownership here, again, like you said, you're not going to make any sweeping changes on day one. Some of the stuff might be gradual. But when you start to look at kind of reshaping Monarch into your vision and the modern vision, what excites you about that?
I'm just really excited to work with the team that we have there. Not only am I excited to highlight the other chefs that we have on, but our serving staff, our manager Kyle, everybody has been a great help. Everybody's really excited to see the restaurant grow. Right now, we're performing pretty well, but I'm really excited to see it grow and elevate it and take it to that extra level where no matter what it is, every day something special is happening at the restaurant. That's where I'm really excited to see it move to. And that's obviously not something that happens overnight, but that's something that happens, 6 months down the line, with the talent that we have in the kitchen and the talent we have in the front of the house, starting, wine pairing dinners and stuff like that, doing different whiskey tastings and everything. We basically, the benefit of being under the hotel is that we can do a little bit more of these fun items, every so often, doing tasting menus and things like that. Once we get the transition smoothed out and ready to go, and have those available for people from out of town, people from in town, just excited to get to all that stuff rocking and rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So,
something that I find very interesting about being a hotel chef is the concept of offering breakfast as well. Mm-hmm. Because most restaurants that are open for dinner, if they offer breakfast, it's just brunch on the weekends. And even then, they hate it. Most chefs hate it because it's just I just got my butt kicked on a Friday night. The last thing I want to do is turn around and come back in on Saturday and do it all again, and then do it again Saturday night and come back in and do it again on Sunday. That's you. Well, I guess I don't know how involved you are. I'll ask you, but that's the reality for a hotel restaurant every day is you gotta, even if the night service is tough and it's just wall-to-wall reservations, you gotta be ready to turn around and do it again the next morning. What has it been like kind of adjusting to that style and bringing in breakfast to your repertoire?
We're open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. People need food. People come to the hotel. I've traveled before in the past for work, and I've had extended stays from a month to 2 months to help open a couple restaurants up in Detroit and Pittsburgh. And I remember just thinking my experiences there, how grateful I was that there was a breakfast option available. So if there's a need for it, which there very clearly is at the bottom of a hotel, you want to make sure that you can fulfill the needs of the guests that are staying there. We're in the hospitality and service industry. It's kind of our job to make sure that those needs are met. To me, breakfast is really nice because it helps somebody. A hot breakfast is really important and really nice because it helps somebody feel when you're outside of your comfort zone, when you're not at home, when you're in a city maybe they don't know a whole lot about, just having the super staple breakfast items like being able to get a pancake, waffle, eggs, whatever it may be. Just it puts a nice home touch and makes you feel not as alone where you're at. So, especially if you're traveling alone. So.
Sure. Mm-hmm. We'll go over a little bit more of your background soon, but as I was looking through your resume, at least what I know of it, I didn't see much breakfast experience on there. What has it been like for you personally to adjust to, I don't know if you're in the kitchen serving breakfast all the time or cooking those dishes, but at least having that as something that you're in charge of. And it's kind of under your umbrella now.
So I haven't ever worked at a true Americana diner or anything like that. We've done one-offs with breakfast service at a couple of the different restaurants that I've been at. But the main thing that I'm relying on, which is why it's so important to have a good team, it can't just be the executive chef and they know everything. You're only as good as, the worst person on your team. That's how good your team is. And luckily for us, the worst person on our team are all very, very qualified people. I even hesitate to use the word worst for them. But the breakfast chef that we have currently at Monarch, Ileana, she's been a whiz at it and been doing breakfast for a long time now. She has her own pastry business and everything like that. So she has helped me be able to elevate the service to what I would like to see it be, to serve out of, when you're not used to having 30 people come in and they all want eggs different ways. She's helped me kind of hone and refine my skills that way.
Something that I think is so important about you is you keep bringing up the importance of the team, and how specifically with breakfast, you had to lean on Ileana and say, hey, this is your area of expertise. I don't necessarily know this. I'm going to, ask questions of you and get knowledge from you. That's a level of humility that I think is very important for a chef to have. It can also be very difficult, especially when you're the most experienced or you're the most senior person on the team. Is that something that you had to develop over time, or has that humility always been part of your mindset and personality?
So it's kind of, everybody comes in and they have great ideas and, you have aspirations. But over the years, you get a couple humbling experience. Maybe you shot, bit off a little more than you could chew or something like that. And that's kind of what my experience has been. I've never shot so hard that I think I've failed. But watching it, where I could have done better at other things and realizing that, the kitchen's a team. You're not alone in this. And you can't just go in, yell and scream and say, why isn't it being done? I see much better results when I was in leadership positions, asking people, sitting them down and being like, hey, why can we not seem to get this done? Is it an issue with me teaching you, or is it an issue with you on the technique, or is this just too far out of your wheelhouse right now? And then kind of trying to identify where those players, need to go. And then it's the same thing with yourself. You got to be honest with yourself and have a conversation and be like, can I execute this? With the availability that I have now, my current knowledge, is this something that I can take on? And so it's something that I didn't take lightly stepping into leadership roles, but it takes a lot of self-reflection, I feel like. And that's something that I've always tried to have, to make sure that you know what you're doing, because you need to help other people know what they're doing as well.
How did you get into cooking originally?
Honestly, I needed to pay rent one day, and I looked around for a job, and Avoli was hiring, and that's where I'd started my cooking career. I'd done a couple things at Qdoba, when I was in high school. But after college, I just really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I saw that they were hiring. I was washing dishes and working garde, and then seeing the fresh pasta being made every day. And just the whole experience there was a fantastic experience, which is really where it kind of jump-started my love for cooking. I thought about going to culinary school, but in the end just ended up working in a bunch of different restaurants. So a lot of chefs that I know either love or hate culinary school, and I decided that I would just split the difference and kind of see where the path takes me right now.
So for those who don't know, Avoli is just a fantastic Italian restaurant in Dundee, one of the best places. I was just having a conversation with some coworkers about it this morning, and we were all just drooling. It's 9 a.m. and we're talking about fresh pasta. Would not recommend, because now I'm extremely hungry. That's neither here nor there. I want, take me inside that experience and inside that kitchen, because you said this was not going to be a career for you. This was just a job. This was a way to pay rent. And look at you, all these years later, it became a career. Something happened in that kitchen that opened your eyes and made you say, this isn't just a job. This is what I want my life to be. What was it about that experience?
It was definitely because it was the first from-scratch kitchen that I'd ever seen. Everything start to finish. It's I remember very distinctly, there was one day I'd come in on my day off, and we were making pasta. We were making gnocchi, and I was just interested, and I wanted to see how to make gnocchi. And we were making these big old batches of gnocchi, and it was just the process of taking raw flour and then just watching that turn into the final dish, starting step one all the way up to the final dish, to see it being served that night. It was just a really magical thing for me to see, and I remember being this is what I want to do. This is the hours, it's a tough job. It's not an easy job. The hours always suck. You're always working holidays, you don't really have a ton of outside time because you're always focused on the restaurant. But watching step to take raw ingredients, turn them into a fantastic dish, and hearing from the guest satisfaction that made their night, their week, or their year even one of the most special things you can do. That's really where I like to see. That's what drew me into the industry. That's why I'm still in the industry and why I very much love the industry.
So you started as a dishwasher.
Mm-hmm.
How did you work your way up? I mean, did you just continue to show interest and people were like, oh, this kid, he might have some skills. He definitely is passionate about it. Or how did you move up?
So I started in part-time dish, part-time garde, which is soup, which is salads and cold items. We started with some specialty bruschettas on there. And I remember just thinking about things that I'd want to do and want to put on. And so, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of like room at Avoli to grow because they had such a stacked team at the time. So then I started splitting my time down at Culprit Cafe, learning how to bake.
Oh,
and then
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Culprit.
Yeah, that was my first instance in baking. So that was the baking and lunch job. So I split my time between then. You start to get, a little burnt out because you're cutting so many hours in. So I told Avoli, unfortunately, we'd have to part ways. And then I went over to V-Merch, and that's where I started to grow into like saute and grilling, because it's just as soon as the need's there, somebody's got to step up, and somebody needs a day off. You're like, okay, well, I'll look at your station. I'll watch your station for you, and I'll see what I can do for you.
I mean, you look at your resume, because we've talked about now Avoli, Culprit, V-Mertz, and Sullivan's. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you also had to stop at M's Pub, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, we're talking about Italian, a bakery, like fine dining, steakhouse, pub fare. I mean, you're kind of all over the board when it comes to different cuisines. Was that intentional for you to kind of like try and fill up your resume and just get a bunch of different experiences, or did it just kind of happen that way?
A little column A, a little column B. I really knew that looking at some of the chefs that I admired, that they had gone and they had people who didn't have a culinary degree background. To make up for that, they had to learn as much as possible from as many different chefs as possible. That way you kind of fill in the gaps in your knowledge that way. So I decided that I was going to try and stage, or at least work at, as many of these nice, James Beard Award-winning restaurants, things like that. I staged a couple of days, for like a week at the Great Plume as well, just trying to learn as much from different head chefs that I admired and different restaurants that I admired as possible. When it came to taking the jobs, it simply came down to the fact that I was like, okay, there's a lot to learn here. I'll stick around for a while and learn as much as I can, and help out the team as much as I can. So
when you look at your current position now and all the experiences that you went through in those years leading up to now, what do you think were some of the most impactful and important things that you learned?
It's definitely the most important thing I learned, I think, is I learned that a dish doesn't necessarily need stuff to be added to it to be complete. It's really, what can you take from a dish, and what your first idea is, what can you simplify it down is to know exactly what the essence of the dish is that you want. If it's a duck dish, what flavors are we trying to highlight? We don't need to do a crazy amount of like spices into the confit. You can really highlight it with maybe like 3 or 4 instead of having like 7 or 8. So it really taught me, because the minute you start to do menu creation, or at least the way that my mind had worked, was that all these things I know go together, so I'm going to put them all in to see what it starts like. But a lot of the chefs help taper that off and be like, you need to start parsing down what goes into this, what the steps are, and how to execute it properly. Because even though a dish might be fantastic, let's say when you're cooking it at home in a very controlled environment, when you're a Friday night and you're 50 tickets deep, if it's a 25-minute pickup time on one dish and people expect a 10-minute pickup time, you can't sit there and be like, well, I'm sorry, but this is where we're at, So it really helps, really just sitting down and like learning how to execute what you want from your dish and how to execute in the restaurant. That's one of the most important things I think I learned. That's also something that I don't think you necessarily get from culinary school, is that real-world experience of, Friday night, we've got 100 covers on. All of them are going to the Orpheum show, so we've got an hour to get everybody in and everybody out. So we can't sit there and, 25 different touches on a plate unless we really know what we're doing and know how to execute. So,
what's an example of a dish that you learned to simplify?
I would say right now would be like the chicken marsala dish that we have on. It's a really nice marsala recipe, but instead of having to add in, the first iteration that we came up from it, when we were just kind of like messing around with the product and trying to figure out what we wanted to do with it, I was like, okay, we've got all this backstock of marsala wine. The first thing I was thinking of is I was like, okay, marsala, prosciutto, mushrooms. We're going to add in like a couple Szechuan peppercorns to give it a little spice, give it a little bit a different flavor. We throw like turmeric onto the chicken to kind of like really intensify and make like a bold dish for it. And then as we're sitting there and tasting it, I'm like, I know all these flavors go together, but we need to start parsing it down into what is the essence of like a marsala dish, which, your major flavors are mushroom, prosciutto, and marsala wine. Deglaze, a little bit of cream. So instead of taking like 12 items into that, we sat down as a team, kind of cored it down into exactly what it was that made the dish itself, and then presented it that way.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about, this variety of experiences that you had. How did the opportunity to join Monarch arise?
Somebody that I had worked with in the past, Kyle, he's a very close friend of mine, had reached out and said that, they had parted ways with their old chef. They were working with some task force members for quite a long time, and they were just having trouble getting somebody in to take over the space. I think a little bit of it is the space itself is very, it's set up very, very well. You got French tops, you've got, your star burners, you have very beautiful equipment in there, but it's really hard to see all of that and be like, okay, well, now I have to execute to that level. So I think there was a little bit of an intimidation factor there that people were kind of worried about. And then, of course, going in and taking over the reins, you want to make sure that you ideally want to be doing better than what your predecessor was. And Monarch, back in 2016, had a Chef Patrick who was just phenomenal, who had come from Dario's, and it was like out of this world good. So just being able to step in and kind of try and take over that, I think was a little bit hard for some people. Kyle reached out to me, and I knew kind of the core team that I had with me, and I knew some of the guys that had been working there already, just through other industry connections. So I kind of sat down, took about a month to think about it, and I was like, do I think this is something that we can actually do and be successful at? And then, a month passes by, and I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's do it and see what we can do.
So you mentioned kind of the kitchen space. I'd love to get just hear a little bit more about that, because Hotel Deco, it underwent a renovation and a complete upgrade after it was purchased by the White Lotus Group in 2010. So obviously you're talking about a very traditional space that's been there for a long time, but the kitchen is modern. What is it about this kitchen that makes it special to you?
You have every piece of equipment I could ask for is on that list. Every single thing that I was like, well, maybe I want something to do a little molecular gastronomy. All the equipment and all the stuff is there. So it's basically, this way the space is set up that a lot of people not in the industry, I don't think, realize is that when you set up a space, especially a space where you're operating out of multiple rooms, if you're doing banquets or something, you have to think about how you execute on service, not just about how you execute with like not one service, but two services. And the way that they had built the kitchen out, where there's two different windows to execute from, to serve food from, to have a natural flow in the kitchen where you can pass things down to be plated up at the end and have like the final touches go before they go out so everybody can get some eyes on it. It's just set up for really ease of execution and smoothness to it. It's not the biggest kitchen that I've ever worked in, but because of how it's set up, it is easily one of the ones that has the best flow of a kitchen that I've ever worked in.
Other than flow, what sets this kitchen, this experience, however you want to take it, working at Monarch, set apart from your other different stops?
Something that kind of sets it apart for me just is in the kitchen itself is just the ability and the creativity. It was almost like I was sitting there picking up playing cards for my like perfect hand or whatever. It's just everything has lined up for all of the chefs that I've worked with or with me in the past. Everybody, we're at the stop now where this is the part of our journey where I feel like we can all get together and work at the same space for, and really allow us to have that creative and freedom and expression to really showcase what we can do. So having not only like a beautiful kitchen to come in and do that at, but having the team come over is probably one of the biggest steps for me, biggest draws for me, biggest steps in Monarch.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your first executive chef position, correct?
Correct. I've been sous chef at 3 other places, but this will be the first time that I like really stepped out and put my name on the board for it.
Now, I know you've made it very clear that like this is not Matt's kitchen. You are leaning on your team. You are relying on your team. You're sourcing their opinions a lot. But you're still, at the end of the day, you know, you're the executive chef. You're the boss. What has that process been like adjusting to for you?
It's just been a little bit more the adjustment process in terms of how I go about with like dish creation and everything like that has just been a little bit more I've had to like take a harder look at it and everything that's coming out, because obviously when your name ends up going up on that board, that means, you know, you're the one that's held responsible, and that means everything coming out of the kitchen I'm taking responsibility for. So it's just kind of one of those things of, you know, as we gear up and start to expand the menu more, making sure that every single item, while I like let the gentleman I'm with, you know, express their creativity and put together their dish, I'm sitting there helping them tweak it out and be like, this is how we're going to do it, and this is exactly how it's going to be plated. You know, not to squash what their creativity is, but to be like, based on my experience and with execution, this is how I think it's going to go. And that's kind of where we play around with on there, and just making sure the general sense of the kitchen that everybody's on the same page and ready to go. So it's about, you know, being there, showing up for the team every day, making sure that we're all doing it together. But at the end of the day, if somebody can't handle something or anything like that, that's where I need to make sure I can step in for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this a little more than a little bit, but some as sous chef, but so much with the executive chef position, it's not, obviously, yes, it's still a lot about food and it's about the dining experience, but it's also about being that leader, about knowing, you know, when to encourage someone and say, yes, be creative and do this dish, and also being able to be the boss that comes back like your bosses did you and say, hey, you got to simplify here, or yeah, this isn't going to work. You know, if we're, it's, you know, we can't have a dish with 25 touches. We need to cut this back. Like, is leadership just something that came naturally to you, or is that something that you're still kind of working through? Do you lean on things that you've learned from other chefs in your career? Take that however you want to. I just, it's not even just other chefs, but it's other people that I've interacted with. You know, you have friends and family who are also in leadership roles and positions, so you have a tendency to look at them and you say, what makes them a good leader, you know? And every single time that I've interacted or been a leader in different positions, I think it was a good sign that I have people that would like to follow me, enjoy me. So I take that as a compliment. And then I don't think you're like a natural born leader. I'm not a natural born leader or anything like that. I think it just happened to be at the time and place, you know, me trying to work on myself as a chef and expand myself. I think that just draws other people because they also want to learn and expand their own skill set. So at the end, I don't know. I think I'm doing a good job. I think my team would back me up on that. But stepping into that leadership role, I think, was something that just would have to happen eventually for anybody in sort of the industry in their career point. Is, you know, some people try it and they fail, but you gotta try every time, because if nobody, I think, in the industry wants to be a line cook forever. They all eventually want to be able to do their own thing in creativity. So I think it has to be a stop on anyone's career in the industry if they're going to stick around for it. Mm-hmm. Last question as we get you out of here. We talked a little bit about the future and how you want to shape Monarch as a restaurant, but I would love to just kind of really encapsulate those thoughts, because this is an exciting time for you. Mm-hmm. Like, you talked about, this is a kitchen where you have all the toys that you could want at your disposal. You've got this team of people that you are so excited about, and you've got these rotating menus that are going to allow you to highlight not only your cooking but your team's cooking. And this has all really come together in like the last month as you've gotten hired and kind of come into this process. So I know that you're still really in the early, the early times with this, but like, when you look to the future of Monarch, what do you see?
I see it as being twofold. I see, based on how the way the space is built out, because we do have like kind of a lounge area, I see it as somewhere where you can have like a nice hot meal away from home if you're staying there. And then I also see it to be one of those places where, you know, you take your partner on a date for your anniversary or something like that, and you're able to go in there and find things that you wouldn't be able to find at other restaurants and have very unique experiences that also highlight everything that we can. So I see it as just twofold, like really nice, consistent hot food on one end, and then on the other end, really elevated experiences where it's a very chef-driven menu and a very chef-driven place.
Fantastic. Well, listeners, whether you have somebody who's visiting from out of town and needs somewhere good to stay and then get a great hot meal, or you want to go have a special experience, Monarch is a place that you can do it. There's a reason that this restaurant is so well known and so beloved, and it's going to be really exciting to see what you do with the kitchen, Matthew. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
In Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.